Yeah.
Mayor, I've not heard from Councilmember Mortensen.
I have.
Weight loss contest.
Sparkly.
The other one, gift if you use. And anyway, she's going down. She's like,
Yeah, we needed now. All we need is a disco ball, and we're set.
So I'm obviously.
So, additional provisions.
And then she throws things around.
Hi, Fred.
Oh.
Good. Okay, that's all right. So that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a caveat to that legitimate.
Right. But that's different from residency.
Yeah.
100%
You ready, Jim?
I am.
Welcome everyone to the City of Evans work session. First item on the agenda is registered sex offender residency. Where's the sex?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. The council held a work session a couple meetings ago regarding the city's current approach to managing and working with registered sex offenders, our compliance with state law, first of all, and then the approach based on kind of best practices as we've had them here so far. The council had some questions and interest for more information from that work session. So we have this presentation tonight. Even since the packet was, I know the chief has sharpened up slides specifically responding to a couple of council questions about numbers of offenders in Greeley. And also, I think we've sharpened a couple of the graphics on the distances from various community features that we could set some regulations based on. So tonight, the chief will be briefing you on kind of on those issues that were asked about, and then we'll certainly want to be responsive to any questions that you have or direction on setting some residency requirements as you think appropriate. So with that, I'll turn it over. Oh, yeah. So the PowerPoint tonight will be what you're seeing in your packet with a couple additional slides for clarity.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jim. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. So just as a little bit of background, as a refresher, how does somebody get designated as a sex offender that has to register? So there's about 25 different, usually sex-related crimes that a court can order somebody to be a designated sex offender and requiring registration. The crimes vary from relatively minor misdemeanors up to and including some very violent felonies. So it's really up to the court to classify those offenses and then classify people and direct them on how they're going to be placed on probation or parole. So in answer to council's, one of council's questions from the work session is Colorado has no requirement for sex offender. However, the courts can advise people that they are required to register once they're convicted of certain violations of the law. So once they're designated as a sex offender, they're required to, if they move into a jail, notify the local law enforcement agency that they're here or where they're at. And likewise, if they leave, they are under some restraint on how they can just leave. They can't just leave, right? They got to notify the leaving jurisdiction and the receiving jurisdiction. Along with some of the classifications of various sex offenders, the most violent ones are classified as sexually violent predators. And those folks are the ones that commit crimes that usually involve children, not always, but typically involve children. One that may not involve a child would be somebody who commits a violent sexual act on a stranger. And that'd be, under Colorado law, they could be classified as a sexually violent predator. So this is all done, these classifications are made by the court based on the facts of the case, and then the court designates these folks. So sexually violent predators have a different set of rules that apply to them, and I'll talk about those here shortly. So again, the state itself does not mandate residency restrictions, and it's left up to jurisdictions whether or not they want to impose jurisdictions on sex offenders. What I learned from my research is, of the 13 cities in Colorado that do have residency restrictions, none of them have restrictions on non-sexually violent predators or special offenders. So there's also, we as a jurisdiction can classify certain offenders as special offenders, and those might be folks that have committed, maybe a violent felony that didn't classify them as a SVP. So that's just a matter of managing who's in our system and how we want to classify them. So of the 13 cities that do currently have residency restrictions, these 7 are the only ones in the state that have 1,000-foot restrictions on SVPs or some of the felony offenders and multiple offenders. And those restrictions are, they're sort of generalized from city to city. So it's from a school, a park, a swimming pool, a daycare. Most of the cities have the same types of restrictions. It's just the distance has changed. So those are the 7 that have the 1,000-foot restrictions. There's some other cities that have varying other distances, and I just classify those as other. And you can see they range from Meade with 100 feet to Mancos, which is 750 feet. Greeley has a 300-foot residency restriction on sexually violent predators and specified offenders, which would be probably those felony or those special offenders that they classify. They don't put, none of the jurisdictions, I may have said this, put restrictions on your, I hate to say run-of-the-mill, but your average registered sex offender. It's just on the sexually violent predators and those classifications. So years ago when council asked that the police department look into the viability of imposing sex offender residency restrictions, sort of trying to follow what Greeley was doing at the time, which at the time were 1,000-foot restrictions on all sex offenders. And we came back with some recommendations and some studies, and council decided not to impose those restrictions. They did ask that we have other means in place to make our community safe. And one of those recommendations were this ordinance that prohibits registered sex offenders from loitering within 750 feet of schools, parks, playgrounds, rec centers, and that sort of thing. So we've had this in place at least since 2012. We changed the verbiage in this ordinance to help council make a decision on how we're going to manage our sex offenders. So since, anecdotal, but since I've been here 14 years, we've never had a sex offender reoffend. And when we talk about recidivism, what I'm talking about is committing another sex crime. Failing to register or other crimes don't count as recidivism, right? So we've never had a reported reoffending sex crime in the time I've been here. So as I mentioned in our last work session, and what I recommended to council years ago, or what I brought to council years ago, was a recommendation by the Sex Offender Management Board of the Department of Criminal Justice in Colorado, who through their studies did not recommend imposing universal residency restrictions on all sex offenders because their studies found that they were not effective at the end of the day. So when we compared what we're dealing with today in Greeley and Evans, these are the numbers that we have. So as of Friday in Evans, we had 82 registered sex offenders, 2 sexually violent predators reside in Evans, and in the last known time I've been here, we've had no sex offenders charged with new sex crimes. Greeley has 428 registered sex offenders, sexually violent predators, and they've had 15 sex offenders reoffend, and of those 15, they committed 21 offenses, 21 new offenses. Greeley's data only goes back 9 years. They didn't have anything prior to that, so that data is valid for 9 years. So I provided a map of where our sex offenders are living. Those are the bright yellow dots. That's where they reside in Evans currently as of Friday. And then we have other locations highlighted that would fit within a recommended ordinance or an ordinance that council may want to enact as to localities that we want to restrict residency from. So obviously there's a park. The greens are parks. These are school bus stops. school bus stops, so you can see they're spread out throughout the city. Daycare centers are the little gold triangles. Schools? Well, yeah, and then we have the schools. These are in gold. And I'll have to qualify as we get into this what the school distances look like. So we have the school building itself. And then if you look around, you see the faint gold border around the schools, that's the school property. So that's where they're located now. The pink ones, these are sexually violent predators. That's where they're living today in Evans. So if the council would direct staff to bring in an ordinance for 300-foot universal restrictions for sex offenders or sexually violent predators, then currently we would have 15 sex offenders that fall within those radiuses that are living within that distance of a school or park. Neither of the two sexually violent predators would be affected by a 300-foot universal restriction. So that's what it looks like on a heat map. You can see the blue is a 300-foot radius from the locations. And again, you can see that our sexually violent predators are not within those 300-foot radiuses. The qualifying point that I need to make here is when the maps were developed, like for a school, for example, it's from the building itself, the 300-foot, but really the law is from the school property. So it actually goes beyond that, and the same with parks. The radius is from the center of the park, but it should be from the edges of the park. So those radiuses should be a little bit wider, especially if you look at the Riverside Park. It should be a wider 300-foot radius around the park. So you have to kind of imagine that, if you will. If council desires to go to a 500-foot universal restriction, we would have 27 current registered sex offenders within that radius of our localities, and one sexually violent predator would be affected. Let me qualify all of this as well, that we cannot do an ex post facto kind of an application of this, right? You can't force these people out. It's just for future registrants. That's the 500-foot map. So again, you can see that we have this offender, this sexually violent predator falls within that school bus stop, and this one's just outside those radiuses from Union Colony and the bus stop up there. And then finally, a universal 1,000-foot restriction that would take in about 60 of our sex offenders and both of the sexually violent predators, and that's what the map would look like there. So very few would be, outside of that restriction radius. And that was kind of down and dirty. What did I miss, Jim?
To recap, the Greeley practice is 300 feet for sexually violent predators without restriction on other sexually violent.
Correct. And that's true for all the other 13 cities that have restrictions. None of them put restrictions on sexually violent or registered sex offenders, right? So they're just focusing on the ones that are probably the greatest danger of our communities. And then I lost my point. I had a point. I'll think of it, but I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Questions of Chief Brandt or comments?
Well, 300 feet is roughly a block and a half.
Yeah, about that.
Football.
Blocks on the east side of town.
Can you repeat? So Greeley has a 300-foot and what else?
It's a 300-foot only for sexually violent predators and special offenders. And as a matter of maybe a little historical perspective, when Greeley first instituted restrictions, they were 1,000-foot restrictions. A metro agency was sued by the ACLU successfully for having the same kind of restrictions, so Greeley voluntarily scaled back to a 300-foot to avoid litigation, I think.
My question is, who person designated? You said the courts let them know about the restrictions. How do they know what our ordinance is? How
Great question.
it conveyed to the court or to the offender?
So when offenders come to Evans and they're required to register, they're given all that information. And we tell them, here's our restrictions and here's what's going to happen to you while you're here. So one of the things, as I mentioned in our previous work session, is we do quarterly house checks. We verify residency quarterly, which the state requires annual. So we actually do quite a bit more proactive face-to-face contact with our sex offenders, and we tell them that we're going to be talking to you quarterly. Sex offenders have to re-register either annually, semi-annually, or quarterly, depending on court order. So we do have some that have to come in every quarter to re-register as well. But yeah, we provide all the information about what they need to know to live in Evans when they first register.
As soon as they're handed their sentence.
When they register here.
When they register, okay. I just was making sure that they didn't move into town and then go register and then find out then that where they moved to is a location that they can't be in.
Yeah, if it's an SVP, we're going to be notified of SVPs prior to their arrival, and that's when we would provide through probably the parole office that they can't live there where they're asking to live. But sex offenders, general sex offenders, we don't get advance notice on them. They register once they arrive. And I think that's maybe part of the reason why the cities don't put restrictions on all of them, just the ones that we get early notification on, because it's easier to manage.
But regardless, our ordinance already says that they can't be within.
For loitering,
For loitering purposes.
Loitering.
not for residency.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if they're just walking their dog by, it's
Right.
okay.
Other comments or questions?
I have a couple. So for clarity, sexually violent predators or registered sex offenders, does that carry state to state?
Great question. So each state has their own designations, especially for SVPs. So for example, a couple of years ago, we had an SVP come from another state into Colorado. Had they been convicted in Colorado for the same offense, they would not have qualified for an SVP, but because they are an SVP, we treated them as such. Does that make sense?
Yes. What if it went the other way?
I'm not sure about the reciprocal part of that.
Okay.
My understanding is once they're designated, but not all states may do that. I don't know for sure.
And then how are we notified? You said we're notified of an SVP, but a standard registered sex offender, it's that person's responsibility to notify us? And if they didn't, how would we know?
Usually we would find out through like a parole office, because
Okay.
we'll notify the parole office that they've registered,
Okay.
because we'll know who their parole officers are. But if we don't know they're here, it depends on if the parole office is being communicative with us and we know. Typically, yes, the parole office will notify us at some point, hey, I'm managing a sex offender in this neighborhood now. So one way or another, we're going to find out, but it may not be immediate.
Also, if I can add on that, and also if they're not on parole but they're on probation, when they transfer their probation from one state to another, they have to check in with the probation office in the county which they reside in, and then that PO will usually notify the town and stuff like that, and that's how that works as well. So.
Right.
Thank you. So then beyond that, if we have, if we can't go back, which I totally understand, if they're leasing a property and it's an annual lease and the lease is up for renewal, how does that work?
Great question. I don't know the answer to that. I would assume it would be up to the property owner whether or not they want to renew the lease. And
But our
Well,
ordinance
I mean,
can't require them, if we have a new ordinance
yeah,
and they have a lease come up,
right.
that's not a trigger for them to have to move.
I'll have to find an answer for you for that one.
Just a
Councilmember.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can ask the city attorney that question.
So if they currently rent or lease a property within the city and we change the code and all of a sudden they're within a bounds that they can't be in and they want to renew their lease agreement, would that suddenly enforce them to have to move?
Other comments, questions?
I'm almost in favor of saying that we kind of utilize what Greeley has. I mean, since we live and share a boundary and border with Greeley, I mean, I would think, in addition to what we have, I would maybe think about putting the 300-foot restrictions in addition to to that as well.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is I think we just follow what Greeley does. We are two different cities, but we're one big community. And I think we should make it the same across the board. And 100 feet for the sexually violent predators is what I'd like to see. I'd like to see more. I did call new chief of police, Adam Turk, in Greeley. He is an old college roommate of mine, just to ask him how he thinks that this works for them, and he likes it. He said it works great. He said on a personal note, he'd make it harder, but he understands why it's not. So he likes how it is, and he thinks it works well for them. So it'll work well for us as well.
I'm good with the 300, but I would like to see the same consideration for lawyering, what it is now. I'd like to see that remain, but add on the 300 for SVP and special.
And the special,
predator,
whatever.
Special
Yeah.
offenders.
Special offenders, yeah. I want to ask a question that I don't need a detailed answer. But SVPs, you said that crimes against children are typically an SVP. So we are protecting ours. As a parent, I want to make sure I'm doing my due diligence for my kiddos and the kiddos of our community. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
What else? Everyone in agreement? We'd like to see something.
Got it.
Yeah, I would also like to just say thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think a couple of reasons. One, I think it's really important. As a parent, it's huge I know it's huge for our community, but really, city council functions for the good of the whole. And so for you to have really recognize an issue and bring it to our attention is greatly appreciated. And it's exactly what we should have in our city. And so thank you. I just want to say thank you. Great job. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Oh, no.
Next item on the agenda is the Master Plan Facilities and Utilities Chapter and the Draft Future Land Use Map.
Thank you, Mayor. As Community Development Director Ann Johnson joins me at the staff table here, I will just introduce that this is one of, not the final, but it's one of our final and also probably most significant and impactful sections of the master plan. And so we do have an overview tonight of the chapter on utilities and facilities and our future land use map. As has been our practice, this work has been done by the master plan steering committee and our team of consultants who are helping staff with research. And it's also been to our planning commission, and they've both recommended it for council's review and consideration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ann, and she can give a little status update on where we are in the overall process, and then an overview of this chapter.
Thanks, Jim. And what an exciting time to be able to bring you the last small presentations on the land use plan or master plan during National Planning Month. So it's very exciting. As Jim mentioned, these chapters have gone to the Planning Commission on September 9th for the utilities and facilities, and then the future land use map on August 12th. And you all have seen the future land use map in other work sessions, but it's going to be formally presented in this work session. So this is where we are. Lots of draft chapters are in review. We're taking a look at them. They go through about 3 rounds of edits and review before they get to Jim and Randy for their review. And then once they've all been scrubbed and polished, then they're being put into the big book. And you all will receive that big document in December for review. So in November for the transportation and trails, and then in December for the master plan. So it's really exciting, and it's coming together really nice. So I'm just really hoping that you're as excited as I am when you get to read it. So the utilities and facilities chapter is a little bit different than all other chapters that you've seen thus far. And it's because we're talking about police, fire, recreation, parks, dry utilities, wet utilities, things that have already been addressed in different chapters. So the way this chapter is going to be organized is we're going to talk about these areas of focus. And, schools are in there, the library is in there, streets. And so in each of those subject areas, there are 10 of them total, there will be action items or strategies, but it might say, please go to this chapter. There will be some direction going elsewhere, but this is where it kind of comes together nicely so we can see we've already addressed these items. They have received a lot of attention, but this is also our opportunity to say, whoops, we forgot something. Let's go ahead and make sure we get it in there. So the first one we're talking about, excuse me. So again, the chapter is arranged just a little bit differently. The recommendations identify these topics that are already listed in the plan in different areas, and that other providers are going to find a home in this chapter with specific recommendations if it hasn't been already addressed. So the first one is just general strategies for utilities and facilities overall, is that the City of Evans is going to survey existing impact fee rates and desired level of service to determine if our rates are sufficient to meet the desired level of service for our future, and that the city will adjust those fees as necessary to ensure that new growth is not adversely impacting the city. So that's just general statements. We need to do this anyway, but again, just let's get it in the master plan and make sure that we're doing this at certain periods of time and frequency. So then moving on to parks. As we all remember that parks and recreation have a different chapter already, but we're going ahead and reference parks here because it is a community facility. So for example, in WC 1.1C, use the municipal plans and the water efficiency plan to create an action plan to implement the 34 strategies and projects. You already endorsed last year about this time that water efficiency plan. We have a water chapter that came to you all really early on because of that Sonoran grant. But again, we're recognizing that we're going to do this here. Two items, again, we're cross-referencing on the last one with other chapters, and then encourage the establishment of a variety of parks. So not just a typical kind, but a variety for all different users. So before I leave this slide, do you have any questions? And moving on to the next slide, again, these are additional strategies that are in different areas. So you can see it is referencing, including community development of parks, working collaboratively with several departments. We're going to update the parks portion of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. That master plan was developed almost 21 years ago, almost 22 now. And in Evans, recreation and parks are managed separately. And so we need to realize that they go together because recreation will sometimes use parks, and parks are a good setting in our recreation portfolio, but they're managed separately. So they need to be looked at separately as well. And so it's time that we update that master plan. Review development code dedication requirements for parks to focus maintenance on larger community serving facilities, such as, do we want to continue to have a requirement when we update our land use code, hopefully next year, to have pocket parks? Or do we want to ask developers to collaborate and do more regional parks? Still having green space, still having open areas in our developments, but do we want to see all these little parks or something bigger? So that's something to be discussed. So are there any questions on this particular slide before we go to the next? Okay.
Just as a reminder, I might just be my kind of planning and action instinct, but everything in the master plan, these do have a much longer horizon than our annual work plans. These are 10 to 20 years. So that's why these are high-level principles that we'll be incorporating and referencing in our annual work plans.
Right, yeah, so we can't do everything next year, even though I'm trying really hard.
We can't?
My-
Come
my-
on, you know.
Blood pressure goes up when I see all this stuff.
Yeah. So then recreation in other parts of the other chapters. So these, again, are just referenced. We're recognizing them, that they're important, that they can't be forgotten, but they are referenced in other parts of the code. So do you have any questions about recreation before we move on to police? Yes.
Well, it's nice to have a mix of both small parks and the larger regional parks for bigger events. The smaller parks are nice for bringing the rec department's programs to the community so that people may not have to commute so far at the end of get their kid from after school to that recreational activity. And especially if you got multiple kids in various activities, it becomes pretty hectic for the parents to get them to all these different things. So I think we need to keep looking at a mix of parks, and we might need another regional type park out to the west eventually to handle some of the larger events, hopefully, that rec department is able to come up with.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on to police. So there are some additional strategies that we would like to go ahead and add here. One, again, is looking for that preferred site for expansion. Compare ballot information to pose a question to the public, which check. Investigate funding opportunities utilizing impact fees related to the expansion of the headquarters and new vehicles and capital investment. As Evans grow, continue to monitor and assess the need for additional services and facilities possible, including little substations, and then collaborate with the regional SWAT team on resources to ensure efficient service provisions to Evans residents. So are there any questions on this particular slide? I know I'm going through them fast, but we also have lots on the agenda tonight, and I don't want to run late. So we'll go to fire protection. So again, continue collaborating with the district, support their growth and placement of new stations to effectively promote efficient growth, explore potential land donation for future fire station facilities. One thing in ComDev that we always do when somebody comes on board and they're looking to potentially donate land for a civic purpose, we always talk about police department, libraries, schools, fire district land as well. So we're looking at the holistic community.
And it's not uncommon for subdivision developments to donate land for a fire facility.
Sorry.
Okay.
These slides go into the master plan, right? Or
These strategies
yeah.
will.
Can we continue collaborating with the fire district?
Evans Fire Protection.
Yeah, I just think some specificity.
Do you know if the fire district is actively seeking donations for future expansion?
Land donations. I believe they are, but they really work closely with us. It's the city that leads the efforts to process land use applications. So that's why Ann mentions that it's one of our, we look for those opportunities with them. The fire marshal is part of our development review team, so they have that voice. But it's certainly part of our screening when any large scale development comes to look for those opportunities that could meet their criteria.
And streets. So again, the primary location for these strategies will be in the Transportation and Trails Master Plan in that chapter. And we will have a separate Transportation and Trails or Multimodal Master Plan, but there will be a chapter or a synopsis of that in the community-wide master plan as well. So you will have two lovely through over the holidays that are going to be super and reflect all of the input we have received to date. So moving on to water and sewer then. These are strategies that have already been covered. We've already discussed them here. And then the next slide then are, again, strategies in other chapters. And then here are 4 additional strategies for water and sewer. Complete an overhaul of the wastewater utility master plan, completing a rate study and evaluating the system development fee study, coordinate utilities consideration concurrent with land use decisions and growth, which we do. We have our wastewater superintendent, and then Scott Sandridge and his team, they are right there, part of the DRT team, and they're fantastic. Coordinating with Central Weld County Water District to look at providing water to other areas that we might be in our urban growth boundary as well. So are there any questions regarding water and sewer before we move on to the library? All right, so here we go. The library is in our culture and education chapter, but there are some additional strategies we would like to go ahead and cover. One is explore and consider needs for additional facility in West Evans. In our conversations with the library district right now, Matt has indicated that he is interested in looking at an additional location in central or western Evans. So again, as developers talk about donating land for a civic purpose, we take a look at where that facility is. We have good communication with our team members and know who's looking at what, and we try to bring a partnership together.
Matt is Matthew Horst, the executive director of the High Plains Library District.
Continue to provide access and connections with the community, and support and expand efforts with mobile resources as well. So are there any questions about the library before we move on to stormwater? Okay, so moving on to stormwater, again, we have strategies that are in other chapters. No standalone stormwater, but then we have schools, and schools are included in the education and culture chapter as well. And so if there are no comments regarding facilities and utilities, we will talk about the future land use map next. Are you ready? Okay. So this is our existing land use map, and it was originally produced in 2004 with our last master plan, and it was updated in 2014. As you can see, now a future land use map and zoning, they're not the same thing. Zoning is kind of that finite, this is what you're going to do, and here's your list of what you can do. But a future land use map is looking at what could we envision here. It also has to be very flexible and adapt to change. If a developer comes in with a big section of land and wants to change things around, we need to work with them and adapt. But in general, according to this map, we wouldn't want to see heavy industrial in an area where we had envisioned urban residential.
It also might be worth noting that the future land use plan, as Ann will describe, is guided by certain distances in most cases, and it does not compel future annexation decisions. So those are all separate from what we're showing in a future land use map. Other jurisdictions likely show land, either abutting or in Evans could be, or not probably in Evans, but within our future land use map boundaries as part of theirs.
Yes, so. And that's a really good point. So when we look at this next slide, which is the proposed future land use map for Evans, you'll see that Evans is restricted by some of those same items that Jim just mentioned, by different intergovernmental agreements that some communities may have with Weld County, and just physical limitations. So on this map, this purple line is our existing urban growth boundary. And you can see, for the large part, it hasn't changed. going from the last master plan to this master plan. So the neighborhood and community commercial centers, which again are these purple and these blue dots, really haven't changed much. That's not a new concept from the last time. Now the floodplain has increased quite a bit, and the floodway did increase quite a bit. So that's what's here in green. So again, future land use map does not mean zoning. It really is a vision, or zoning is that reality, but the future land use map is a vision and a goal of what the city of Evans has in mind. So on our northern boundary, again, there have been no changes. The only good thing that has come about is from about this point here west, the city, the city of Evans and the city of Greeley have had conversations, and we have decided that 65th from this point, 37th from this point west will kind of be our line in the sand. They're agreeing not to be aggressive south of 37th, and we're agreeing not to be aggressive north of 37th, and that will be memorialized in an intergovernmental agreement.
And that follows what I'm sure many of you will recognize as a longstanding commitment, I think, by both communities. Neither community has been able to locate an actual intergovernmental agreement saying that, but I've certainly heard, maybe you have, that was agreed upon probably a decade or more ago. So the cities are talking about, as Ann said, just memorializing that so that we all know.
So again, the northern boundary has not changed at all. Going to the east, the city of Evans has an agreement called the KEG agreement, and it is Kersey, Evans, and Greeley. And this boundary over here represents that our existing urban growth boundary, but also respects the Kersey, Evans, Greeley agreement as well. So some changes that did happen here, a boundary change did not occur. The floodplain designation did get quite a bit larger. At the 34 bypass and 34 itself, this node was on the old map a commercial node, but it's all in the floodway and the floodplain now. So it seemed a little disingenuous to try to encourage commercial development there when they're going to have problems developing. So we just left it in the floodplain. This purple area right here, we are saying that it is estate. It was urban density residential development, and we went down to estate, which are 1 acre lots, because it is a little bit more compatible if folks need to be on septic systems, but we can get public water in that area. We just thought based on utility provision, it might be better suited for estate type development versus high density. This is a rail corridor, and it was industrial, and we kept it industrial here. So that is that for the east side. Now let me get to my notes for the rest. So on the southern boundary, there were some additional changes as well. So south of the river, again, the land mass shown in the green area or the floodplain area did get quite a bit larger because of FEMA's new map changes. So the commercial node at 46 and 47 here, that was a neighborhood center, and we're just saying it might be more right for a commercial node. Estate and agriculture, so this purple here, estate, and this agriculture here, it was urban residential, and again, that whole service provision, the sewer, the water, we can get water, but we might not be able to get sanitary sewer to that area. So we thought it's probably more likely that it's going to be estate type development and ag, urban ag or ag holding versus that high density. And then commercial on the west, we added this little commercial node here because this is Highway 60. And then 44 is also a state highway. And I'm sorry, now that I'm here, I can't tell you the name of that state highway, so I apologize. but we thought that the intersection of those two state highways might be a good area for a commercial node. And that was urban residential as well. But the industrial stayed industrial. This commercial stayed the same, and it just really changed here based on the reality of providing services to the south. Then over on the west, again, you can see where our current urban growth boundary is, and it's about 4 additional sections that we have proposed to add to our urban growth boundary to the west. Again, we go out to State Highway 257, and we propose to just go a little bit to the west of 257, but we are going to be, Jim has initiated discussions with the town of Milliken, and we will be meeting with the town of Milliken. They are showing on their urban growth map some area for urban development within our area. Two Rivers Parkway kind of is our current service boundary for water and sewer. And so we're going to be talking to them about this area and try to come to an agreement there. So again, about 4 sections of landmass are being proposed for inclusion, and it really is based on where we can serve. There's a ridge line up there just south of 37th, and we tried to keep all of our urban development on top of that ridge line, and then more rural development or estate development just on the south side of that ridge line. So that is it for our urban growth boundary and our future land use map. In Colorado revised statutes, we are required to have something called a 3-mile plan. And that 3-mile plan is where does the community want to grow, and how do you want to grow 3 miles beyond your current municipal boundaries? Well, like other communities in northern Colorado, our 3-mile plan is very unrealistic because our neighbor to the north, our neighbor to the east, we have LaSalle to the southeast, Platteville and Gilchrist are to the south, and then Milliken is to the southwest. So we really are hemmed in with how far we can grow, and so we looked at this exercise as what is realistic based on service provision, based on where we already are, based on what's happening in unincorporated Weld County within our urban growth boundary, and tried to be realistic about our vision for the future. So with that does conclude the presentation for this evening, but I am happy to take conversation and take some notes about your feelings about the future land use map.
I have a question/comment. So we were just talking about, the other communities and their boundaries and how they want to grow. Well, we know some of the communities on the western end, Milliken, Johnstown, all that, they all want to be aggressive and grow. We're trying to, it sounds like, and to me, it just sounded like how far does Evans want to grow? It shouldn't be, Milliken wants to build north, Milliken wants to, it's like, no, Evans should not be letting them encroach on us. We should be encroaching on them and taking advantage for the city itself. So why aren't we looking to grow more and not allow them to keep coming up and taking areas that we could use for development away?
I'll start with just one of our guiding principles is cost effectiveness for utility service. Ann talked about that ridge line out there, and there are some topographic reasons why it's going to make more sense for us to stay north and for Milliken to probably be south. We feel that showing some vision for land use over to Highway 257, especially with that potentially commercial corner on the southwest of that intersection, is a good reach for us vision-wise for the next 10 to 20 years, especially when it comes to utility service. But I will say the purpose of this work session is to hear council comments, directions on where you'd like to show if there's more or less. We'd like to have that feedback, and we'll move accordingly. But you're right, there are going to be competing communities, and there are going to be some realities of how far we can go.
Because I mean, I understand what you're saying about the ridge point, the, utilities and all that other stuff. I completely understand that. But as entities want to move in and they want to grow and develop, those services can be provided. So if we could go from, that line there all the way, say, maybe take it out to 257 and have that whole area there, we set ourselves up for that area there. If there's any development that ever wants to come in the future, that can be ours versus it's going to be Milliken's or Johnstown's or whoever. I would say we could start taking areas there because we know there's going to be development along those areas in the future. That could put us in a good position. I mean, and as that growth happens, those utilities can happen and all those other, stuff can be put into place.
So that's a very good point. Some of the area that is here has already been annexed into Milliken. So we kind of scooched as far west as we could where they weren't already annexed.
Well, you guys know that I'm kind of on the minority of this. I believe that we've got natural boundaries that we should include ourselves in, which for me is the river, and then ridge lines where it's easy to push your waste downhill instead of having to constantly do pump stations, and that costs money and everything. And on the other side of the river, of course, that leads to a lot of other service issues too. Including flooding. So my question, and again, I say I'm the minority here. Everybody thinks bigger is better. I think better is better in that we have a lot of places infilling where we could really make a difference in our community. However, my question is over on the east side, and the boundary, I do believe it's in the purple. You mentioned the railroad spur. Currently, last year, that there was a big section of property within that boundary that was purchased by an aggregate company to make aggregate. And I'm just wondering, with this in our draft, that company doesn't have to come to us yet. They are just going through I have the same problem. I can't turn my off.
So right now, that area, Councilwoman Spear, is in our intergovernmental agreement with Kersey, Evans, and Greeley. And so if that aggregate company is in unincorporated Weld County, they can go to Weld County and say, we'd like to develop. And Weld County, because they have an intergovernmental agreement with Evans, and right now ours is a 3-mile plan with Weld County, any development that's happening 3 miles from our current municipal boundary, we get a referral for. And we reach out and say, we would really like to annex you, or we would like to do this. And you saw a pre-annexation agreement a couple weeks ago, and that was from that referral process. So we have the opportunity to comment, and we have coordinated with Evans, Greeley, and Kersey to comment on some gravel mining in that coordinated area. And that particular intergovernmental agreement does try to discuss land uses which are appropriate in that area as well. So, roundabout answer with a lot of information for you. We would get a referral if it's in Weld County, and we would have an opportunity to comment on that. And then also we were respectful to our other partners in that KEG agreement, and we coordinate our response back to Weld County together as well. But we can't really stop development.
Yeah, and I guess that was my question more so was if it was in, and I'm just going to kind of make this up, if it was in an area that we had designated as the 1 acre parcels for homes, and that's what our vision was, but the aggregate company is going to come in and run, rocks for 10 years. If that's how that affected our land use.
Right, definitely. I would be on them and say, let's do a pre-annexation agreement. We have it slated for that rural residential. During your reclamation plans, we'd really like to see you incorporate rural residential or some type of an amenity. We'd like to have you annex into the city of Evans. So we would be working with any developer through the process right now, I've sent referrals back in saying it doesn't really meet our long-range vision. Have you thought about going somewhere else? Or could you come into Evans and would you consider working with us? A lot of times because our IGA with Weld County isn't really strong. They don't recognize municipalities the way other counties do. Usually they just kind of get to do their own thing. But if I can get it in writing that it doesn't meet our long-range vision, then it's a celebration.
Where was the Milliken line on the west side there? How much of that did they take in that was annexed?
It's this property here that's outlined in gray, and then
Okay.
they came down this road here to get their contiguity.
And then what about,
Really, where's their border?
yeah, and what about further west to 257?
So currently on this slide, everything that's in gray
Uh-huh.
is in their influence area. This dark line here is their current municipal boundary. And then this is in their municipal boundary. And then they're saying that this is their urban growth boundary as well. They want to come really close. So
How do we prevent that?
What?
How do we prevent that?
How do we prevent that?
Oh, we get aggressive and we make friends with these people
Well,
and can.
Yeah, and we also, that'll be the subject. The goal of our conversations we're starting with Milliken is really acknowledging this map, that we're both wanting these different areas. And first start trying to see, is there an area that, that you can, are there natural areas that should be in the different communities? That's ideal if we can do that. And we're all, I think, Milliken and we have acknowledged it's better if we can do that in advance. A lot of times, though, the annexation, only happens when development happens.
Right.
And that's what we need to be thinking about and be positioning ourselves with our capital programs, like we believe we are, to be able to serve those developments more effectively than other communities.
I'm saying they're just doing a lot of encroaching, and it's like, well, we need to be a little bit aggressive and say, and we're going to take this.
Yeah.
Annexed.
Anyone else? Comments? Questions?
And how how dependent is that south west and commercial area dependent upon Evans putting through a bridge across the river at 35th, perhaps, and utilities to get down to County Road 44 and 46 there in the southeast corner.
I'm hearing the question: is development to what extent is development contingent on that bridge? Right.
If we have the bridge, of course, we're going to get more dense development, and that really opens up the corridor more quickly. This is a state highway, this is the intersection of two state highways. So eventually that will develop, and it is a state highway system with frontage. We're proposing on two state highways. So they can get water down here through Central Weld County Water District. And sewer can be on septic, even commercial sewer or commercial septic systems permitted through Weld County.
But I'm asking about the southeast corner.
Oh, the southeast. Okay, sorry. So that is US 85.
Because 35th is where the bridge across the river will serve to 85. So to what extent will that help development happen? And I think, Ann, as Ann said, development will likely be more dense and will happen sooner when we have that bridge.
And it's still going to be dependent on being able to put the utilities down there.
Else?
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Presentation.
Next item is the 37th Street, 47th Avenue Roundabout landscape.
Thank you, Mayor. Design and construction preparation for 37th Street, especially at 47th Avenue, is getting close, and I think that's what you'll see tonight. Our engineering team and our consulting team need some direction from the city on the look and feel of the roundabout that will be built next summer. And so that's the purpose of tonight. And I believe, and I'm going to probably stop my remarks there and turn it over to Randy Reedy, who will give the staff portion of the overview, and then I believe be assisted by our consultants.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, Mayor and council members, we're excited about the opportunities that the next phase of the widening of 37th Street presents. As you know, that's 47th Avenue east to Sienna. And within that area, there'll be a roundabout right there at 47th Avenue on 37th Street. It's a sufficiently wide roundabout to accommodate all kinds of trucks and vehicles. The WB 67 very large rigs are designed to go around it, and it includes a thickened concrete apron around the edge. Even if they miss or for driving hazard or whatever, still not going to, bump into. They will bump onto the apron without destroying anything in the roundabout or hurting their vehicles. So that gives us an opportunity for a aesthetically pleasing, highly functional, basically a design statement here at one of our key intersections right there at 47th and 37th. We've been working with our engineering consultants, Roxol, and have tonight our landscaping design consultants from BHA Design. Doug Elger will be kind of driving through some of the some very nice graphics that enable you to pan and tilt and look at this from all angles. And Roger Sherman here will discuss some of the concepts that they've developed with staff's input and assistance to give you some alternatives for what the center of this roundabout could look like. Almost limitless possibilities for what it could look like. It could be very simple, could completely hardscape it, could do it similar to 83rd and 83rd Avenue and 20th Street in Greeley, which is a very native boulders, gravel, and different native plants. But we gave them kind of 4 parameters, basically. Said they came to us and said, okay, we've got this opportunity, about 68 feet here to landscape. What do you want us to do with it? We said we'd like 4 things. 1, please be consistent with what you're already doing. They are the landscaping designers for 47th Avenue to the north, so it makes it very nice. So they're already doing that, know what that landscaping is like. You all earlier this year approved some landscaping themes for 37th Street, just to the east of here, that include some features like gabion baskets and some corten steel. Again, all of them need to be water-wise, water-efficient plants. Whatever we do, we want to be consistent with our water efficiency plan. We want to be able to maintain this so that it not only looks good on day 1, but day 10 is something that's maintainable, something that Scott and his crew can take care of, and that we're all proud of after 10 years as we are on the opening day. With that in mind, I won't spend a lot of time describing the concepts because that's what Roger and Doug are here to do, but these are concepts, and you'll see on them a number of, we got the logo. I think some of them say welcome to Evans. We recognize this is not a welcome statement. You're already deep into Evans by the time you get to this point. The point of these graphics is to let you know that we can do whatever you'd like to do. We can put the logo, we can put Evans, we can put street names, those kinds of things on here, but with the corten steel gives us an opportunity to do some description or painting. So it's not nothing you see here is drafted in stone or in
although it could be.
It could be. It could be, yeah. And needs to be. We're presenting this to you now because these folks would like your direction on, okay, we kind of like alternative 1, or if you could blend alternative 1 with alternative 3, that sort of thing. So they can go back and finish the construction drawings for this to include in the bid package early next year. So we're ready to go. When our federal funding is released on July 1st, we've got a construction package ready to go. Contractor can mobilize and get this built for us. So we do have, as you saw in the memo, we do have a staff and consultant team recommendation. that I won't mention right now. I think in fairness to you, and probably that's cutting to the chase anyway, and it is entirely up to you. We're not wed to any one concept. We'd like this to serve the community well for years to come. So with that, I'll introduce Doug and Roger. I'll relinquish the seat.
Okay, if you want to come closer, Randy, this way, then.
Okay.
Good job.
Good evening. My name is Roger Sherman, and I'm with BHA Design, and with me here tonight is Doug Elger. And Doug's been spending a lot of time on the concepts that we'll share with you tonight. And not just us. I mean, we really have. It's been a very collaborative process with city staff. We've met several times with city staff, and they've really helped us to understand Evan's vision for the community and how this project fits into that vision. So we can't take full credit. So, you know, it's interesting. You know, your public spaces represent the best opportunity to express the city's vision, and public streets are the most visited public spaces in any city. And you know, streets can create social connections and bring pride to the community, and really contribute to the tapestry of rich public spaces that make a city great. And you know, during one of our project meetings, Ann Johnson mentioned that the city heard through the master planning process that reinvestment into the city through development of amenities is important to attract quality subdivisions, commercial and industrial reinvestment in Evans. And this project is one way in which the city is fulfilling that goal. Tonight's presentation will focus on 3 different concepts for the proposed roundabout at 47th and 37th. But the project, as Randy mentioned, includes additional streetscape beyond this. But the intent is that this be a unified streetscape, and so the concepts that are shown within these roundabouts also extend into the medians along the adjacent streets. And so the goal here, I guess, is that we've talked about and Randy mentioned too, is to kind of ensure the vision of an attractive, sustainable, and low maintenance design that will be constructed. And we do feel that whichever design you select is setting a standard for development and communicating expectations for future growth. And so that's probably the end of my comments, and I'm going to turn it over to Doug, and he's going to share the 3 concepts with you, and then we'll open it up to discussion after that. Look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Hi, yeah, I'm Doug Elgar with BHA. So it sounds like the city's really excited about kind of creating a consistent materials language with the streetscapes in town. So just as kind of a precursor to sharing these concepts, I just wanted to say we're predominantly using Corten steel, which is kind of like it looks like a weathered or rusted steel without kind of undercutting its structural integrity, and gabion walls, which are like wire enclosures that are filled with cobble, as well as boulders that have been used on the 47th project that's under construction now, which I believe are using silane boulders. So we'll just kind of match some of those same materials. I'll also be sharing the prices that we've estimated for each of these concepts. They vary slightly. The prices I'll mention are specifically the improved the roundabout within the apron of the roundabout, and don't include the medians on all 4 sides. And just one more thing before we go into the concepts. Each of these will start kind of looking from the north, or as if you were kind of going southbound into town here. As Randy had mentioned, the staff had kind of preferred concepts, which is this first one we're looking at here. Concept 1 plays to the City of Evans logo. We're using a combination of boulders and different surface materials like mulching and cobble to create the language of flowing water. This central feature here is, let's see if I can pan around here. This central feature is uses a long, about 40-inch tall gabion wall with 3 varied size Corten panels that the planes kind of stagger a little bit and cut perpendicular through the gabion wall. These panels, we would like to see the City of Evans logo on it, as well as Evans, Colorado, or welcome to Evans, some kind of language along that line. And then it's 37th Street as well. We believe this will work on both the north and southern sides. We've estimated this concept to be around $219,000. Oops. The second concept we've prepared here centers around the main sign, which faces north. Go a little bit closer here, which faces north. Boulders, plantings, and striped surface materials form concentric arcs around the sign. The sign itself will feature a 6-foot-tall, rounded Corten retaining wall that contains the city logo, Welcome to Evans and 37th Street. It's worth noting that some of the other concepts have signage face on both the north and south side, so this is kind of limited in that respect. But on the back side, we'll have a planted slope down to the concrete apron. By the way, each of these concepts show trees in more or less the same location because we're largely constrained by underground utilities, so we're basically placing them where we're able to place them. And we've estimated this concept to be around $200,000. The third concept, we're showing a kind of a series of elements that all radiate around the center, which features the main sign here. The elements include low Corten panels. We might, have the street signage on those, and then medium height gabion walls behind those. For the main sign, we'd like to include 2 7-foot-high gabion and Corten walls that include the signage, the city logo, and welcome. That could also potentially be like more of like a single pylon structure in the center, so we could kind of play around with what that looks like, because that is probably the most expensive feature in this roundabout. We've estimated the cost of this concept to be around $235,000. I'd also mention we've included in these prices placeholders for uplighting on all of the signage faces, as well as some string lights in the trees. And I'll hand it back to Roger if you guys have any questions.
I don't have anything else to add, so we can just open it up to discussion.
I think that does conclude our remarks. So, Mayor.
Questions or comments? Mark?
I think all the concepts looks great. I'm actually more drawn to concept 2. The only thing that I would say is I wouldn't be in favor of the trees. Maybe instead of saying like welcome to Evans or something, put like Freedom Parkway, because that's going to be Freedom Parkway there. And just something, Freedom Parkway, Evans, right, something like that. That's what I would see. There would be a way to kind of keep it low like that, and maybe put it on both sides, the Freedom Parkway of Evans, so it's facing both directions. But I'm more drawn to concept 2. I think it all looks great, but I would like to see it say Freedom Parkway and then use the Evans logo.
Tammy?
I'm with Mark. I don't want to see any trees at all, for many reasons. Number one, I'm short already, so someone's going to drive over that hill. I want to see it coming up. Because you never know how crazy people are nowadays. So for me, and I've seen so many of them die throughout the city that for me, I just no trees. I would be fine with the water smart bushes and all the other. I'm fine with the no trees. The other thing is, with all of these, everything that I was hearing was north to south. Well, what about coming from the west, east? Yes, we're into Evans by now, but shouldn't we have something identifying at least on that side? And I took you guys' one concept and I did like a little short, I think I took concept 3 and I did a little short 4 wall. So on each side, as you're coming up, you can see what you're coming up on. So Freedom Parkway, Evans, or, you're coming up on 47th in Evans. So my thought was we need to have that identifier all around. Right. But, again, I know it's just concept, but that's just my thought on it. So, but I do like all of these, and I do like the steel structures, and I love all that. So thank you.
Well, I want to kind of tag team off of hers. Number 1, no trees. I mean, we have a problem with trees as it is. We plant them, they die. So we could just nixay the trees. I like number 3 also, but the reason why I like number 3 is I guess I've been in and around a lot of big rigs, and I've also seen a lot of casualties as far as landscaping on the middle of these things. And the more you put around the border, the more it seems that it's going to be wrecked in maybe a sliding accident in the middle of wintertime. So yeah, something like that where it's in the center, and the bushes can be replaced if they're low, if they're really drought tolerant. But I do like the center idea, having it in maybe an big Evans sign in the center, and then the roadway signs around as you're approaching, you know what you're approaching. I like the rocks, love rocks and cement. And thank you for designing one of those curbs, because again, if it's a actual curb, you got the big rigs coming through, which we do know that oil and gas go through there quite a lot, in a random horse trailer or two. And with the little bumper curbs, what did you call them?
Like a rollover.
Yeah, those little
Apron.
aprons.
Mm-hmm.
If they roll over it, then it doesn't interfere with the landscaping. So yeah, that's why I like the center, is so that it doesn't get hit any more than it needs to get hit.
So this is the one you prefer, just to be clear, the alternative
They
3?
say the trees, yeah.
Right.
But again, like Tammy said, I mean, I like it where we have like some big Evans sign over the top, so you're driving up, you see it's Evans, and then the smaller road signs, so that when you're driving up, you know that that's Arrowhead Drive, 47, Freedom Park, whatever.
There will be directional signage and other street
Okay.
names and all of that. This is not the limit of the signage
Okay.
by any means. So.
Yeah. Anyways, I just like it. Whatever the design is, I just like no trees and in the center, so it doesn't get smashed any more than it has to. Hopefully it won't get smashed, but.
Fred?
I too wrote no trees. My reason is Tammy's reason, that I'm vertically challenged, so that helps. Having said that, I don't like design 3 because of the height in the center. When I approach a roundabout, I like to be able to see the whole thing. Like I like the roundabout on 83rd and 20th because I can see around it. There's a roundabout in Loveland that has stuff in the middle and I can't see around it. And the problem I have is that cars come flying around it and I can't see them. So for me, it becomes a visibility thing. Like I would like visibility when I'm approaching for the entire, at least for the 2, right, that would be most impactful. Yeah, I think I would see the one, I hope, to my right. Having said that, I like this concept if the center were smaller. My whole thing comes down to height with trees and all of that. So I would just prefer it to be bushes or native grasses or something.
To have lower features.
Yes, which is why, yeah.
Like a more lower profile.
And I didn't
So
know
one of
how
them that
tall it was.
you do.
I put that I preferred 2, but I said 1 with no trees, 2 is good. But I do like the idea of kind of the welcome being all-encompassing. I would say, I'm totally going to speak for myself here, I am horrible with directions. So I like a roundabout that has the sign clearly marked as you're leaving. If it were in the middle, I'm pretty sure I'd be confused. And I'd be like on vacation where he's just driving in a circle. So I don't know that I would put the street names on this center part, because I feel like people who are perhaps directionally challenged like me would also have a hard time with that. So I do like the idea of welcome to Evans or something like that, but I don't, for me personally, I don't like the idea of putting the street name on the sign. I like it directionally as you're leaving a roundabout. I think that makes the most sense.
He said that fairly.
There'll be signs.
Yes, I like that, but I don't want to put it in this. I don't think we need the street name it can get confusing.
I just want
Confused. I
street
think by the
names.
time you saw it in the center, you already passed where you
Right, you're like, oh, yeah, was that where it's going?
And
Yeah,
somebody's gonna go like,
exactly.
"That
That
was
would
talking about the
be,
roundabout
So
3
this is
times already."
one. Can we show two again, please?
Absolutely.
And I would add that I think one has the most porosity in terms of views through it as
Yes.
compared to the other two.
I would agree with that.
One was the one I liked the best.
Yeah, I like
How-
I
the
would
way
just
it
wanna see
leads
Evans
too.
from more than just the north.
Right.
How tall are they designed to be? Was it 40?
So yeah, I
The
think
wall is
I-
40 inches, so that you can kind of tell that.
That's the rock. Okay.
Right.
That I like.
Okay.
Yeah.
40.
so. Maybe this is about head height right here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You had me at 3 until 7. Like, nope.
Maybe.
So lower in the middle.
No trees.
Okay.
There's some wayfinding signs somewhere else, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just wanted
But
there to be.
identifying the city of Evans, I don't.
Evan, I like the
said,
idea
that's
of
what I'm saying, I
identifying.
don't want that
Identifying.
just coming
Yeah.
from the north. Because people coming from the west, but they can't say welcome, because by then you're.
It'll be
way
the
there.
logo with
That's
the
what I was saying,
river and
Evans Freedom Parkway or
Yeah.
something like that.
I agree.
But I agree with everything you said except for the Freedom Parkway part. Because to me, that's Evans. That's not part of Freedom Parkway. The street
Yeah.
is, but the citizens
Right.
of Evans and this council's taking it, not the people of Freedom Parkway. So to me, that's ours, not theirs. So
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
leave Freedom Parkway off it. I was on that.
I mean,
I was on that. I'm for Freedom Parkway. I just think that's not part of Freedom Parkway. It is.
right. No, no.
I'd rather showcase
Yeah.
Evans,
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
you know?
Yeah.
Evans.
I like it.
And I don't know, I mean,
But my choice was one.
I think to Tammy's point, you know, I don't know if there's, I'm just throwing out an idea, like a pinwheel type kind of thing in the middle with a, you could see Evans, welcome to Evans or something, I don't know, something that you can see it from all directions. Yeah, there we
I don't
go.
like flowers and a flower.
Yep.
Mean tree.
That already passed.
MAGA right on the.
Something like, you know, and
DeSantis.
Somebody's face is going
DeSantis,
A little
no.
more visible.
Yes, and now that brings me to this point, we need security cameras on there?
No,
I do
really
like
it.
the lighting. If there, so it lights up, the lighting is spectacular, and I think this day and age, we have a lot of, solar lighting that we can use too. I guess there's utilities under there, so whatever, but the lighting is very important, and if our sign can light up, that would be amazing.
I don't know that we got you an exact answer on 1, 2, or 3, but I think we got you enough information. You could make something of what we just said.
Agreed.
I heard some preferences for, I think 2 preferences for 2 and 1 for 3, but I'm hearing kind of a round one if we can make some changes to it.
Yeah, I mean, now that
One
I
with
know
more
it's
size.
40 inches
No trees.
versus
Yeah,
Yeah.
shorter, no
shorter,
trees.
no trees, yeah.
Like, I almost wonder if you could do, I love the welcome to Evans, if you could flip that on the other one too that's currently empty and maybe stagger them, because I see what you're going for there. Oh, it's on.
that kind of has it. You just turn the one in the
That
middle.
one?
Yeah,
But then maybe, yeah, if you turn it a little, or on the side where it's the, whatever you call
on
it,
the
with
Gabion wall.
gravel in them,
Mhm.
yep, that, if you could put
But
just a
maybe it-
different little welcome
maybe
in there.
angled,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
you're running them,
We're
yeah.
here.
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
we're hearing you.
so that
Yeah.
when you're
Right.
going around, you can see it no matter which, if you're
So
going.
this
the
is-
signage could be on different materials. It wouldn't always have to be on the Cortan. It could be on the Gabion walls if
Right.
it worked out in an
Right,
interesting
exactly.
way.
That's kind of my
Right.
thought, because I like that staggered look, and maybe on the, then where the Gabion wall is, you have a different little sign on there.
For me, just the 3 sides, I'm not really worried about people going north. It's just the one neighborhood.
Right.
It's on
Run that
east,
down.
west, and south.
Right.
Perfect.
Don't we want the logo right there though, for
Yeah.
the people coming out of there?
Yeah.
So at least the 3 ways.
Like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're all good
Yeah.
concepts.
So some more visibility here. See, Doug, this is approaching from the west, right?
Let me get my bearings here. Yes, this would be the west, correct.
Yeah.
Headed west right
So
there.
we're headed
Maybe
east
if it-
here.
Yeah, if it was
Yeah,
a little
east
more
there.
angled, that'd be
Yeah.
good.
So that's the west. Would you show us from the east, please?
Yeah, so we just need to use angles.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
angle it,
Yeah.
Angle it.
just angle it,
Because
Yeah.
I think if you just angle
yeah.
it, you'd be there.
Another thing I appreciate about this concept is it changes as you go around. It looks slightly different from every angle, and so it kind of, I think that's kind of fun.
That's
But I like the idea
yeah.
of the angles. That's a great idea. If we could see those Evans
Right.
panels in particular from 2 different directions. That's a great idea.
And then from the north, it's very prominent, but we need to correct that and make it more prominent from the east and the west.
Yeah, I like that.
Right.
But is it in the middle? I just don't want it to get hit.
we can center it a little bit more,
At
sure.
least you'll see them coming at you if they do hit the middle.
But you're good with the palette of different rock, different boulders.
Agavian baskets.
Yeah, that was good.
We're talking about the wall kind of like what is over on
Yes.
Calvin's.
That's,
Yeah.
yes, exactly right.
That's very attractive.
That's
Yeah.
really cool.
I like it. It's very cool.
I just have to let you know that Community Development Director Ann has got to send back 5 boxes of lights for those trees that she has ordered already.
Love you, Ann.
So, yeah.
Everything you need from here.
Great job.
Great,
Thank you.
Appreciate all your time.
This has been a fun project to work on, and these guys have been great to work on.
No, wait, we
forgot Brad.
Thanks, guys. Amanda stole some of my thunder. I'm all for visibility about roundabouts, and I think Amanda needs to go to Boston and get in one of those 5 exit roundabouts. She'll find it so exciting. So I'm definitely without the trees, and I like all 3 of the concepts. I think I preferred number 3 just for the visual effects. Did you say these are supposed to be 7 foot tall?
The Corten panels? Right now, Doug, what's the tallest?
Yeah, 7. But I think 7 would be the highest.
Go on and do 7 feet tall.
And we've already made
We've already
those
made
should
that.
be shorter.
That's already been chopped down, yeah.
I'll come down. Yep.
Half the logo.
Half the logo. Right.
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah.
Oh, good. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
You betcha.
Yeah.
Jim started to sweat this one a little bit. Next item on the agenda is the council chambers audio visual systems upgrade.
Yeah, going to be joined by our expert, Chris Bragg, the IT director.
Okay,
Right. No, we joke, but the pandemic conditions of the last 18 months, I think, have brought some of the challenges to light that we have in this space in our council chambers, and we for some time, but I think our the really expectations that we have now for council chambers experience and what we need to do for effective meetings are prompting action. So, as I said, while we do joke, there are the equipment in this room is older and can be expensive to completely replace, and we have some options for for intermediate kinds of solutions. So I've asked our IT director, Chris Bragg. You don't see Chris often, who's kind of spearheading this project and the evaluation of our needs and having conversations with various vendors who are experts in this field, to just come tonight and recap what some of the technical challenges are in this space, some of the talk about the improvements that are in the works, and some of the options that we have for a more comprehensive upgrade over the next few years, because we are going to need it even if we don't spend the money now. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Well, thanks, Jim.
And wouldn't it be funny if the clicker didn't work?
I tested it as well.
Oh, no.
With the IT director.
It's all good. Well, thanks for letting me speak on this tonight. I know that this has sort of been a much maligned, problem that we've had to deal with, especially over the last year and a half. I think we've seen that as we've introduced, some remote participation into this, some Zoom conferences and things that's just sort of amplified the problems for this room. And I feel like some of the complaints that we've heard are specific to that. Just briefly, I'll touch on what our current technology is in this space. I'll go over some of the issues and concerns and limitations of what we have right now that we've identified. Different upgrade scenarios that we had some vendors provide for us. Excuse me. I'll go over what our selected upgrade path was and the improvements that we expect to see from that. And then I'll just wrap it up with some, hopefully, some realistic expectations about what we can expect to see after these upgrades are done. So just to touch on our current technology, we do have a Crestron-based AV system. This is pretty standard in the audiovisual space. Ours was put in quite a while ago. I'll go over some of the details of that. We do still have a combination of both some analog equipment and digital equipment that's in use right now. We have a combination also of some wired and wireless microphones for this space. More on some of the problems with that to come. Obviously, we have a couple of video projectors. We put in 2 new video cameras early last year for this space. In January last year, we did install a video capture and live stream appliance so that we could deliver these sessions out to YouTube, to the city's YouTube channel. And of course, we have just a standard Windows PC that is being used by the clerk to control all of the session and the presentations. So the background on some of this, much of the equipment that we have in this space was installed 8 or 9 years ago. We invited 4 Crestron vendors in the local area to come out here early last year, actually just before COVID struck, to give us an idea what it would take to upgrade the space. They were of the opinion at that time, most of them, that the equipment that we purchased was actually end of life at the time we bought it. So not that it was used or defective or anything, it was just older equipment that cost less to implement. So that was discovered. The system that we currently have is several hardware generations behind where Crestron is today. And so there were some initial recommendations that we might want to consider replacing the whole thing. Probably important to bear in mind that a lot of this discussion took place during COVID when we were looking at budget reductions and how we were going to save money. So we tried to come up with a cheaper option. Excuse me. We identified that we have some analog components. We know that that's the weak link in this system as far as tying that into our internet-based systems. We are currently only able to use wired microphones in this space. I'll get into why that is in a little bit, but clearly that's all we have in use right now. And we know that our 2 video cameras, unfortunately, when we put them in, the vendor who we don't do business with anymore installed them incorrectly, and they're running at a much lower resolution than they should be. So some of the current issues, concerns, and limitations on this, the Crestron hardware itself, because of its age, is no longer covered by any sort of manufacturer warranty or support. And unfortunately, it can no longer be upgraded to anything that's current firmware to provide new features. The analog audio processor that I mentioned, we know that this is the piece that causes us difficulty in fine-tuning the microphones for this space, for getting rid of the distortion and the echo and the feedback that is sometimes experienced in here. Excuse me. The analog processor also is what provides us reduced quality to both the clerk PC that's going out to Zoom and to the live stream appliance that we're sending out to YouTube. The current wireless mic system here doesn't really work at all. We have not only some broken microphones, but the antenna array was installed in the back room behind a brick wall, and it only covers about half this room. Clearly that's a problem, so we're going to address that. The wired mics, you can see they're plugged into the floor. You're limited to where they can be placed based on the configuration of the room and what's going on. So we know that we're looking to solve that as well. And again, I mentioned the video cameras being at low res.
Cameras and projectors. You might mention that.
The projector actually is running over HDMI, and that's probably okay. It's really the video images that we're sending out to YouTube. When you watch it on YouTube, it's a much lower quality than it should be. Our couple of upgrade scenarios that we asked for. Again, initially we had the vendors provide us something that was going to be at the lowest cost to us, and yet solve all the problems that we'd identified. This first upgrade proposal, excuse me. is expected to cost about $18,000. We need really just 2 or 3 business days on site for the vendor to come in here and do the installation in this room where it could not be used. But the 4 problem areas that we're going to address, the video cameras will all be rewired and reconfigured. The analog audio processor be replaced with something digital. We would put in a new 4-channel, 4 wireless mic system. We'll use those gooseneck style you can place anywhere in the room. And then the Crestron software will be reprogrammed to its, max capabilities to accommodate all this new equipment that'll go in. The second proposal, quite a bit more money, $110,000. It'd take about 5 to 7 business days to where we'd have to shut down this room to do it. I won't go into the details of all of that, but needless to say, we're going to replace the entire Crestron system, very expensive. We would replace our projectors with some laser projectors that would provide us much better quality. Video cameras would be new, a new live stream and capture appliance to give us more capability there, add more cameras, that sort of thing. So what did we recommend to do? We decided to go with this option number 1. Again, it does address the immediate problems that we've all recognized. Specifically, we're going to get a much higher display resolution on those cameras. The digital audio processor will give us better control and calibration outputs throughout this room. The new wireless microphone system will improve mic quality and give us the flexibility to move those anywhere in the space. And then the reprogramming of this system will not only accommodate the new equipment, but it will be made much easier to use for the clerk to control during these meetings. So some of the variables, we have things that we obviously can control. We have things for this experience that we're never going to be able to control. So what are those? Clearly in this room, we'll be able to improve the audio and video experience of what happens within the space. We'll be able to deliver a much better experience out to our external sources on Zoom, YouTube. We'll have a better microphone system. It'll all be wireless, or part of it will be wireless in this first scenario. And then clearly we can control our internal network. Things that we can't control and probably will never be able to control, end user experiences on their end. As far as their internet connection, their computer setup, their microphone and speakers, those kinds of things. Excuse me. Yeah, why did I leave off? Oh yeah,
variability of the ISPs.
Yeah, both internally and externally. I mean, the limitations of what somebody has experiencing at their home, for example, if their internet is slow, if their computer's not up to snuff, those are things we're not going to be able to control either. So the post-upgrade experience, we can expect to see that, again, we've improved audio and video within this room and what we're delivering out over the internet. We are going to reduce the echo, the distortion, the feedback in this room. I should have brought some water. We're going to have the ability to move some microphones around and use them where they make the most sense. Thank you. And we're going to improve the Crestron control system for the clerk and whoever else runs a meeting from this space. The things we're not going to be able to change, the experience of joining and participating in Zoom remains the same after this is done. Our remote participants are still going to be limited by their own service. Our reliance on external resources such as Zoom, Teams, YouTube, they have to be available, obviously. They can't have outages of their own. And sadly, none of us are going to get any prettier or wealthier because we put all this in place.
Editorial.
Well, maybe some of us will. Jim probably will. So just to wrap this up, the city manager has given us direction to go ahead with that initial first upgrade proposal. We've already been working with ordered. It's kind of unfortunate right now, but with the worldwide supply chain problems, it has caused delays. We're still waiting on a final piece of equipment to come in before we can schedule the upgrade. But once we're able to do that, and hopefully to be at the end of this month, we'll be able to schedule that and take just a couple, 2-3 days to get everything in place here. After that, our plan is to monitor it, tweak it as necessary, and hopefully we've provided a better experience. We'll evaluate if it's necessary to go to that larger scale, more expensive upgrade at a later time. That was all I had for you.
So I guess my question to you, based on that information there, is because it says it's no longer covered by like the manufacturer support, the age of the equipment, just going in and doing that $18,000 in upgrades, are we going to get a warranty? Are they going to be able to support that? Because if we're going to spend this and it fails, and then we're going to have to say, well, now you're going to spend another $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to fix this issue. Wondering where the cost, if that's worth the cost, and if we should maybe consider doing the full upgrade, because I don't want to get in that situation. Well, it failed again. We just spent $18,000. Now we're spending another $18,000 or whatever.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So the work that's going to be done by the vendor is supported, and it does provide warranty for us. But you're right, on our existing equipment that's already beyond that, if it fails, it fails, and we're going to be buying new equipment. There's no doubt about that.
And the 18,000 will only be addressing some of the equipment, so we'd still have vulnerability on the others.
Right, that's correct. Again, the idea initially was to just solve the problems that we knew that we had in the most efficient way that we could with the funds available. The reason this has taken so long is COVID threw us a curveball. I think we would have had all this in place had it not been for that. But we were considering budget reductions at the time, so it took a back seat to everything else.
Yeah, my concern is just the short-term solution. You know, what's the cost going to be long-term wise? You know, let's.
I can tell you, we did discuss with the vendor, even if we started with this initial upgrade, we would continue to use that new equipment that's put in place, and then we would upgrade everything else around that. So we're not having to start this process over again. We can incorporate what we've already upgraded.
We wouldn't waste the first 18.
Well, that's a very good point, because as a person who has a home on their property, anytime something breaks down and you think it's going to be just just going to fix this part of the plumbing, and then the next thing you know, you're fixing the main water line. You know, so that's a good point. I do want to point out, though, if I may, Mayor, take over.
Absolutely.
That everything has worked very good tonight, Chris. Thank you for being here, and apparently you can solve the problem a little bit easier by just having you here.
Well, and I think if we show up 2 hours before and reboot everything and keep doing all that before y'all come, it probably helps a lot. Yeah.
Intensive testing.
That's right.
I don't know if anybody else noticed, but anyway, I think the 3 things that you mentioned, we have the compatibility. An issue, I think, between the computer here and the projectors here. I think a compatibility issue is one of the problems we've had. The low res on the cameras. I've watched this meeting on YouTube several times. We've got low res. Everybody's kind of blurry. Thank goodness. Thank you. So if it gets better, we do need some glam squad here. I also.
I'll come early for that.
But even more important, though, is audio issues. I can never understand Fred, but I don't know if we're going to get him to speak up. But the people, I've asked them.
I have a chance.
But before. And for someone like me who is very loud, it's not a problem. I can hear myself, at home right now. But the audio issues on that.
Yeah.
So you've said that these three things will be addressed with the $18,000 issue. I kind of agree with Mark, so I know we're dealing with taxpayer funds, and I'm always very cautious on where we spend our money. But I mean, I'm at the point where a new system probably would be better instead of intertwining old and new. But that's, something I think we can all agree on here. Yeah. That's just my opinion. The other question I have, though, is kind of a little bit of a side thing. I've been in several meetings in different locations other than here. I've been in some of the boardrooms. I've been to the library, where, again, we have issues with compatibility. Someone's in there, they're trying to bring it up onto the screen so that we can all see the plan or the presentation. Mm-hmm. And it's not crossing over. So I
Crossing
just want to
over.
make you aware of those problems and to kind of have that in the back of your mind on how we can go about fixing that. And
Okay.
I don't know if the upgrade on the larger 110 would also be a help for that situation.
There is a portion of it that would incorporate, say, a second computer over here, so not everything is going through one. I think some of the issues where control has become a factor is everything's being driven off of one computer. So if the clerk ever has to click off of the presentation to do some other task,
Right.
it removes focus from this and nobody can function. So we did discuss putting in a second computer over there as well.
I think because that's a lot of our frustration. So,
Yeah.
you know, just the presentations when it's really important to have them up there. And I know it's not Jules' fault. It's just the system.
So
So,
maybe a second computer that only runs specifically that.
I mean, those are the issues I would like to see corrected.
There was some initial discussion of putting in an actual Zoom room system in here, but it was nixed because it can only be used for that one purpose. I mean, we do have other uses for this space, and we've, as an organization, gone to Microsoft Teams for a lot of things. It would have prevented use for that. It really was just Zoom only, and that wasn't our only platform. And so we tried to work around it another way.
Those were my points. And
Yeah. Well, I think when it's all said and done, we'll at least be able to remove the barriers that you've had and seem to have gotten worse over the last couple of years. So,
I think for me, there are still a couple of issues I would like to address, and hopefully they're minor to solve. But I'm not looking. Don't worry. I already wrote my own notes. As you know, I've had the opportunities to participate from home. One of my biggest frustrations is that I cannot see council. It really drives me crazy talking to a blank screen. And I think even if I were a participant from the community wanting to participate, I would greatly appreciate not having to patch YouTube and Zoom. I know there's like the Meeting Owl cameras that will rotate to our participants. I think spending $1,000 on a tool like that to have in council chambers would be extremely useful and very appreciated by anybody participating via Zoom. It's very difficult not to look at people even virtually when you're participating. The other thing actually that I'd already been thinking of that came to light tonight, thank you, Ann, she set me up for this, but the pointer, like pointing at one and not seeing it on the other, has actually bothered me a lot. And I know they make virtual pointers that will allow you to see what you're pointing at on multiple screens. I would also love to look at that.
Oh, that'd be,
Well, and I'm on that end, so I always am looking here, and everybody's
Exactly.
coming from here and pointing there, and I'm like,
So that would be really great if we could do that. I mean, I think those are pretty minor things, but they actually do matter quite a bit when you're in the middle of something. And I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh, they're pointing over there. Oh, they're pointing. So I know they make that technology. It would be really great if we had the opportunity to.
Two comments to your points. To your second point, one of the components that would be part of the larger upgrade would be called a document camera that many city council chambers now have, where either from the staff table or the podium,
Right.
someone can come up, put down a document, and it's up here, so that not everything
Like
is
a modern
run.
day projector.
So it's not all run through PowerPoint.
Right.
And so that would be something that has some cost to it, but I think if we did the whole thing, we'd want to have that kind of modern component. To your first point, one of the costs we've been trying to avoid that we could look at for the overall experience, especially given more and more remote participation, is the cost of, it's not many hours, but many cities invest in having contract video kind of editing during the meeting, which you really need if you want to start directing cameras to give different views.
correct. Yeah.
So that's the kind of enhancement that we could consider that we haven't, that would give us, especially if we do the complete upgrade with cameras that would facilitate that, more options for the remote participation.
Yeah, and I like that. I mean, I have several clients that use the AV technologies. I know that costs money, but I don't know how Meeting Owl works. I know we've been looking at it for our office. And I don't know if that would be a solution, but that's $1,000. I don't know if there's additional charges attached to it.
What is it called that you just said?
Meeting Owl. It looks like a tower, and then it actually rotates, and the camera points to whomever is speaking. So I think even a simple solution like that, that's a one-time cost, might provide some resolve, at least for now, without the...
To Jim's comment, the system that we have actually is capable of doing a lot of camera swaps and fades and all sorts of techniques for this. It's unfortunate, though, that we don't have anybody to do it, and the clerk is busy managing everything else. There's nobody to perform that function.
Right.
So we do, at some rudimentary level, we do have the ability to do some of that. If we were to implement another camera that could focus on who was speaking, for example, there still would have to be somebody that was making those transitions when needed. Me, I have to...
We have that in one of our conference rooms where the camera moves.
Yeah.
It hasn't worked great. I mean, it's a little, and that might just be the
I would
quality.
take one camera looking at...
No, I know what you're talking about. Actually, when you use Teams, for example, it has the ability to focus the camera on whoever's speaking. So that, I think that's the feature you're talking about. So similar to what I think you're describing with the Meeting Owl.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely some things agreed on. It really comes down to how much money do we want to spend to do it. I think if it's one of those things we're willing to throw enough money at, we can make anything happen.
I think for me, even just seeing participants, period, would be better. And I'm hopeful that would not be a very expensive fix, but it is really, it's so...
Even if you could just see in here as you were on your thing.
Yes, exactly. But it's really hard when maybe somebody is queuing up to talk or something. Those visual cues matter a lot.
So just so they're gone. You're only seeing the presentation
I
that
only
is
see
given.
the presentation.
Okay.
I see nothing else.
All right.
And so it is really difficult. I would just appreciate the opportunity to see counsel. And I feel like the general public would appreciate that.
And that's why I asked you what you were seeing.
Yeah.
I don't
say
I'm
anything.
here all the time.
You see that. Like, you see the presentation.
That's it.
So that's why I was like kind of...
Yeah, honestly, it's only been a year and a half since that live stream appliance went in that anyone watching remotely even saw more than just that camera in the back of the room. Right. There was no display, so baby steps, I guess. We'll get there.
Fred, this is right up your alley. What do you got, buddy?
Well, I'm in favor of going with the smaller cost to see if that fixes some of the problems. Very definitely. I'm not sure how much, as we all know, we can't get people to come in here, and we don't seem to have very many on the Zoom platform. But it is important to be able to provide that service. And right now, I don't know whether it's worth the additional cost. If this seems to fix most of the problems that we're having, and it lasts for another 10 years, I think it's money well spent that way. Because who knows, we may be wanting to do something different with this room, depending on how the election goes. So.
Actually, to your point, the vendors that did come in, even though clearly our equipment is older, none of them gave the indication that it would stop working and we needed to replace it. Only that we were limited for introducing any sort of new features to it. It is what it is today. That's all it'll ever be. And if we're okay with that, then it could potentially last us for the time frame you're talking about. But I think some of our, at least on our end, some of our hesitation for making major upgrades was how much was this going to take off? How involved would we be with Zoom or having a YouTube audience or that sort of a following that made the investment worthwhile? But if your direction is to do that, I think we can clearly do that.
Almost 20% would cost just to do some upgrades. But the equipment's already. That's just me personally. This is years ago. They would tell us that as soon as you walk here, it was obsolete.
Yeah.
And
that hasn't changed.
Stuck in my head I don't know why, but it has stuck in my head. So for me, I look at it and I see all the trouble that everybody over here goes through and everything.
Yeah.
And I love the double pointer idea because and I'm left-handed, so I like the rough left. But I'm also right under it, so really. But for me, I personally just looking at everything, looking at the cost, looking at the difference in what we could get if we went ahead and spent the 110. Personally, that's where I think we should actually, you know, I'm on the end of spending the money.
So that's where I'm at too. I think this last year and a half, 2 years has changed our world. I think we need to change with it. Everything's going Zoom. Everything's going. I do have one question. What's a Zoom room?
Yeah, it's a specific component that you can connect to a Crestron system it really just removes the PC, a dedicated PC for doing this, but essentially you have a button you can push connect to your conference. It's again, I'm hesitant to do it because it doesn't really change the experience. It merely changes how the clerk is going to connect to the session.
Connection to Zoom.
Right.
I think the world's changed. I think, like Fred said, we're not going to get people in here. But I think if you give it a good system and people can see it and people can do it, I think you would get some people watching it. I think Judge Stewart could run his court from it. I've watched court TV lately on A&E, and that's how they're running court right now during COVID for some cases. I think you could do a lot with the upgrades. I'm as tight as they come with spending money, but I'm with Tammy. 20% now for kind of okay stuff, or spend it now and get the right stuff in here and get it all fixed. I'm for fixing it all. I think the world's changed and we should change with it.
Yeah, and I mean, my accounting brain goes to useful life. And when you said 10 years, I kind of laughed to myself and thought, I mean, I give it 3.
Right.
Honestly, like for technology, but if we spent 100 and whatever, would it be, what do we really think our useful life would be at that point in time?
It is a little different than when you're talking about maybe your home computer or something like that. Right? I mean, this is it has a dedicated purpose, and so the life of it can go longer than you might find with your home electronics that are doing many things. But yeah, to your point, if we're gonna make massive improvements, we should go large and let's gut the whole thing and start over again. Just know that it wasn't the top requirement for any vendor that walked in here.
And with that being said, too, as I'm one of the ones for fixing it, we got to find that money somewhere. We can't just. We're not the federal government that's going to make more.
Well, I would encourage us to look at CARES funding and stuff for that because I've been able to utilize that for AV upgrades.
I think we could.
I've been able to.
This is how we had council meetings for COVID.
Yeah. The only downfall is it has to be spent by 12/31.
That's the CARES Act funding. We can see about that, but there's the ARPA funding, and there's also our own year end. We're getting toward year end, and we're starting to project some of the unspent budget that will be coming back to you in April anyway, or May, that we can kind of look at advancing and just, moving that along, so we can look at what savings we might have and, move forward if that's council's direction. I would just, caution, the one thing Chris keeps saying to me and why I think he's going cautiously with the 18,000 is it's not going to solve everything. And we're still going to have to lean into our mics. We're still going to have to, test things with people at home because their own systems and settings, are not something we can control. So, but I do think all the sound, the monitors, the functionality with the document camera, all of that will be better, and it would take away some of the vulnerability that we have for an already older system. So we can find that money and move forward if that's if that's council's direction. We will have a better experience in the council chambers.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to spend.
And I said maybe we could even get reinforcement for the dais walls so that they don't fall in on council members during meetings.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to spend 18,000 for basically a Band-Aid fix, and maybe 2 years from now you're going to have to replace it, and instead of being 110, now it's 130. Well,
I may have been a little misleading. It's 110 minus the initial 18 that we would put into it. We can still use those components.
Those
So.
prices may change.
That's true.
Because of Supply and demand right now.
True.
I'm
Yeah,
with
yeah,
Frank,
hopefully
though.
the
I
supply
feel like
chain
we're
issues-
moving that way, and we need to
Everything.
move with it.
You shop at home now, you don't go out. Everything
exactly.
you do, you don't.
And I will tell you, I'm far more likely to participate in my HOA meeting or a community meeting or whatever if it's via Zoom, because I can be home with my kids, participate as a parent. But when I'm participating, I'd really appreciate to see people. That's my only complaint. Like, it drives me crazy not to see people. And I don't even need a close-up. No offense, guys. I don't need a close-up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't want to be seen. That's why.
But it's also awkward that you can see me and I can't see you.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Sometimes.
So it sounds like we have some overwhelming direction to go with the larger replacement. Okay. I'm
So here's what I would recommend. Since the audio improvements, this might be where you were going,
yeah.
are going to be part of the larger installation. We need to move forward with those. I don't want Chris to stop and get back into the whole thing. I think to the extent we can keep the audio, please, the microphone improvements going, and then just fill in as we can over the next, as long as it takes the next year.
Yeah, I agree. And my concern would be that with the extent of the supply chain problems that we're experiencing and the who knows when those will recover, if we put this on hold and do nothing and we're waiting for an entire new system to come, we may not correct anything for another year or two. I mean, we just don't know. So if we can keep this momentum going and then incorporate the rest, we'll do that.
Yep.
Okay.
That works.
All right.
See you in November.
Yeah.
We gotta go.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.